Book of Heaven, Volume 13, Part 3. September 16th, 1921. Jesus mocked by Herod. How these pains are renewed by creatures. With his acts, Jesus molded the acts of the creature in his will. I was doing the hour of the Passion, in which my sweet Jesus was in the palace of Herod, clothed as a madman and mocked. And my always lovable Jesus, making himself seen, told me, "My daughter, not only then was I clothed like a madman, sneered at and mocked, but creatures continue to give me these pains. Even more, I am amid continuous mockeries, and from all kinds of people. If a person goes to confession and does not maintain his resolutions not to offend me, this is a mockery that he makes of me. If a priest confesses, preaches, administers the sacraments, and his life does not correspond to the words he speaks and to the dignity of the sacraments he administers, he mocks me as many times for as many words as he speaks, and for as many sacraments as he administers. And while in the sacraments I gave them new life, they give me scorns, mockeries, and by profaning them, they prepare for me the garment to clothe me as a madman. If superiors command sacrifice to their subjects, virtue, prayer, disinterest, while they conduct a life of comfort, of vice, of interest, these are as many mockeries that they make of me. If civilian and ecclesiastical leaders want the observance of the laws, and they are the first transgressors, these are mockeries that they make of me. Oh, how many mockeries they make of me! They are so many that I am tired of them, especially when, under good, they put the poison of evil. Oh, how they make fun of me, as if I were their amusement and their pastime. But my justice, sooner or later, shall make fun of them, by punishing them severely. You, pray and repair for these mockeries that grieve me so much, and are the cause of my not being known for who I am." Afterwards, having come back again, and since I was fusing all of myself in the divine will, he told me, "Dearest daughter of my will, I anxiously await these fusions of yours in my will. You must know that, as I thought in my will, I kept molding your thoughts in my will, preparing the place for them. As I operated, I molded your works in my will, and so with all the rest. Now whatever I did not do for myself, who did not need it, but for you. This is why I await you in my will, that you may come to take the places that my humanity prepared for you, and over my moldings you come to do yours. Only then am I content, and receive complete glory, when I see you do what I did." September 21st, 1921. God wants to give his goods to his children. Jesus before Caiaphas. The operating of the divine will is daylight. As I was in my usual state, my always lovable Jesus, on coming, told me, "My daughter, in what painful conditions creatures put me. I am like a most rich father who loves his children immensely, but the children are immensely ungrateful. to the point that while the father wants to clothe the children, these refuse the clothes and want to remain naked. The father gives them food, and they want to remain starving. And if they eat, they feed themselves with filthy and vile foods. The father offers them riches. He wants to keep them around himself. He gives them his own residence. And the children do not want to accept anything, contenting themselves with going wandering, homeless and poor. Poor father, how many sorrows, how many tears does he not shed? He would be less unhappy if he had nothing to give. But possessing goods and not being able to use them, while seeing his children perishing, this is a sorrow that surpasses every sorrow. So I am. I want to give, and there is no one who takes. So creatures are the cause of my shedding bitter tears and of continuous sorrow. But do you know who dries my tears and turns my sorrow into joy? The one who wants to be always together with me. The one who takes my riches with love and with filial trust. The one who eats at my own table and clothes himself with my own garments. To these I give without measure. They are my confidants, and I let them rest upon my own breast. After this I found myself outside of myself, and I saw new revolutions arise among different parties, and how these shall be the cause of greater fights. And my sweet Jesus told me, "My daughter, if parties are not formed, true revolutions, especially against the Church, cannot happen. In fact, if the party did not exist, the element against which one would want to fight would be missing. But how many from this party, that in appearance is said to be Catholic, are true wolves covered with the mantle of lambs, and shall give many sorrows to my Church. Many believe that with this party religion shall be defended, but it shall be the complete opposite, and the enemies shall use it to rail more against her." Then afterwards I came back into myself, and it was the hour at which my beloved Jesus went out of prison and was brought again before Caiaphas. I tried to accompany him in this mystery, and Jesus told me, "My daughter, when I was presented to Caiaphas, it was full daylight, and the love I had toward creatures was so great that I went out on this last day before the pontiff, all deformed, wounded, to receive my condemnation to death. But how many pains this condemnation would cost me! And I converted these pains into eternal days, with which I surrounded each creature, so that, by dispelling the darkness from them, each one might find the necessary light in order to be saved, and my condemnation to death at her disposal in order to find her life in it. So each pain and each good that I did was one more day that I gave to the creature. And not only me, but also the good that creatures do is always day that they form, just as evil is night. It happens as when a person possesses a light, and 10 or 20 people are near him. Even though the light does not belong to all, but to one, the others benefit from the light. They can work, read, and while they enjoy the use of the light, they cause no harm to the person who possesses it. So it is with doing good. It is daylight not only for one creature, but who knows for how many others can she form daylight? good is always communicative, and my love not only pushed me, but it gave to the creatures who love me the grace to form as many days for their brothers as good works that they do. September 28th, 1921. Jesus is eternal light, and everything that comes out of him is light. Living in the divine will and the path of virtues. Similes of the sea and of the earth. Continuing in my usual state, my always lovable Jesus made himself seen close to me, with his heart all in flames, and at each beat that his heart emitted, a light came out. These lights surrounded me completely and diffused over the whole creation. I remained surprised, and Jesus told me, "My daughter, I am eternal light, and everything that comes out of me is light. So it is not just my heartbeat that unleashes light, but each one of my thoughts, breaths, words, steps, each drop of my blood, are light that is unleashed from me, and diffusing in the midst of all creatures, they take their place as life of each one of them, wanting the requital of their little lights. In fact, they too are light, for they too were unleashed from within my own light. But sin converts the operating of the creature into darkness. My daughter, I love the creature so much that I conceived her in my breath, and I delivered her upon my knees, to let her rest on my lap and keep her safe. But the creature runs away from me, and as I do not feel her in my breath, and do not find her upon my knees, my breath calls her continuously, and my knees are tired of waiting for her, and I go searching for her everywhere, to have her back with me. On what constraints of sorrow and of love do creatures put me! Then after this, as I had heard someone speak about humility, and I am convinced that this virtue does not exist in me, nor do I ever think about it. When my sweet Jesus came, I told him of my concern, and he said to me, "My daughter, do not fear. I raised you in the sea, and the one who lives in the sea doesn't know much about the earth. If one wanted to ask the fish what the earth is like, what its fruits, plants, and flowers are like, if they had reason, they would answer, 'We were born in the sea. We live in the sea. The water nourishes us, and while others would be drowned in it, we dart, and it gives us life. And while to other beings water would freeze the blood in their veins, to us it gives warmth. The sea is everything for us. It serves us as room, as bed. We stroll in it. We are the only fortunate beings that don't need to tire themselves in order to find food. Whatever we want, everything is ready at our disposal. So we can tell you about the sea, not about the earth. Water alone serves us as everything, and we find everything." But if instead one asked the birds, these would answer, "We know the plants, the heights of the trees, the flowers, the fruits." They would tell of how much they toil in order to find a seed to nourish themselves, or a hiding place to be sheltered from the cold, from the rain. The simile of the sea is for the one who lives in my will. The simile of the earth is for the one who walks along the path of virtues. Therefore, since you live in the sea of my will, it is no wonder that my will alone is enough for you in everything. If water serves, and does many different offices for the fish: food, warmth, bed, room, everything. Much more can my will do it, in a more admirable way. Even more, in my will virtues are at the most heroic and divine degree. My will absorbs everything, and melts everything within itself, and the soul remains absorbed in my will. She feeds herself with it. In it she walks. She knows my will alone, and my will is enough for her in everything. It can be said that, among all, she is the only fortunate one who does not need to beg for bread. No, but the water of my will inundates her above and below, to the right and to the left. And if she wants food, she eats. If she wants strength, she finds it. If she wants to sleep, she finds the softest bed in order to rest. Everything is ready at her disposal. October 6, 1921. Sin is the black point of man, but the state of grace and of doing good is the luminous point of man. I was praying and adoring the wounds of my crucified Jesus, and I thought to myself, how ugly sin is, to have reduced my highest good to such a harrowing state. And my always lovable Jesus, leaning his most holy head upon my shoulder, sighing, told me, "My daughter, sin is not only ugly, but horrible. It is the black point of man. While he sins, he undergoes a brutal transformation. All the beauty I gave him is covered with such ugliness, horrible to the sight, and not only the sense that sins, but the whole of man runs along with it. So sin is the thought, the heartbeat, the breath, the motion, the step. The will has dragged man to one single point, and from his whole being he emits thick darkness that blinds him, and a poisonous air that poisons him. Everything is black around him. Everything is deadly, and whoever approaches him puts himself in a dangerous state. Horrible and frightening, such is man in the state of sin. I remained terrified, and Jesus continued, "If man is horrible in the state of guilt, he is also beautiful in the state of grace and of doing good. Good, be it even the tiniest, is the luminous point of man. While he does good, he undergoes a celestial, angelic, and divine transformation. His goodwill drags his whole being to one single point. Therefore good is the thought, the word, the heartbeat, the motion, the step. Everything is light, inside and outside of him. His air is balmy and vital, and whoever approaches him places himself in safety. How beautiful, gracious, attractive, lovable, striking is the soul in grace, in doing good, so much so that I myself remain enamored. Each good he does is one more shade of beauty that he acquires. It is a greater likeness to his Creator that makes him to be distinguished as his child. It is a divine power that he puts in circulation. Every good he does is a spokesman between heaven and earth. They are the couriers, the electric wires that maintain the communications with God. October 9th, 1921. The will of man is that which most resembles his Creator. The human will is the depository of all the operating of man. I was thinking in the act in which my sweet Jesus was having the Last Supper with his disciples, and my lovable Jesus in my interior told me, "My daughter, while I was having supper with my disciples, it was not only them that I had around me, but the whole human family. One by one, I had them near me. I knew them all. I called them by name. I also called you. I gave you the place of honor between me and John, and I constituted you little secretary of my will. And while I divided the lamb, in offering it to my apostles, I gave it to all and to each one. That lamb, bled dry, roasted, cut to pieces, spoke of me. It was the symbol of my life, and of how I was to reduce myself for love of all. And I wanted to give it to all as delicious food that represented my passion, because everything I did, said, and suffered, my love converted into food for man. But do you know why I called all and gave the lamb to all? Because I too wanted food from them. Each thing that they would do, I wanted to be food for me. I wanted the food of their love, of their works, of their words, of everything. And my love, how can it be that our operating becomes food for you? And Jesus, it is not on bread alone that one can live, but on that to which my will gives the virtue of being able to make one live. And if bread nourishes man, it is because I want it so. Now, whatever the creature with her will disposes to make of her operating, that is the form it assumes. If with her operating she wants to form food for me, she forms food for me. If love, she gives me love. If reparation, she forms for me reparation. And if in her will she wants to offend me, she makes of her operating the knife to wound me, and maybe even to kill me." Then he added, "The will of man is that which most resembles his Creator. In the human will I placed part of my immensity and of my power, and giving it the place of honor, I constituted it queen of the whole of man, and depository of all of his operating. Just as creatures have chests in which to keep their things in order to hold them secure, so does the soul have her will in order to keep and secure everything she thinks, says, and does. Not even one thought shall be lost. What she cannot do with her eyes, with her mouth, with her works, she can do with her will. In one instant she can will 1,000 goods and 1,000 evils. The will makes her thought fly up to heaven, to the farthest places, and even into the abysses. She might be prevented from operating, from seeing, from speaking, but all this she can do in her will. But everything she does and wants forms an act that is left deposited in her own will. Oh, how the will can extend! How many goods and how many evils can it not contain? This is why, among all things, I want the will of man. Because if I have this, I have everything. The fortress is conquered. October 13th, 1921. All the words of Jesus are fonts that lead and spring up to eternal life. I felt oppressed in thinking that I am forced to say and write even the littlest things that good Jesus tells me. So on coming, he told me, "My daughter, each time I speak to you, I intend to open a little fountain in your heart, because all my words are fonts that lead and spring up to eternal life. But so that these fonts may form in your heart, you must also put something of your own. That is, you must masticate them thoroughly, to be able to swallow them into your heart and open the font. By thinking about them over and over again, you form the mastication. By telling them to those who have authority over you, and as you are assured that it is my word, you swallow it with no doubt, and you open the font for yourself. And on the occasions of your need, you make use of it, and you drink in large gulps from the font of my truth. By writing them, you open the channels that can serve whoever would want to quench his thirst, so as not to let them die of thirst. Now, by not telling them, you don't think about them, and by not masticating them, you cannot swallow them. So you run the risk that the font shall not be formed, and that the water shall not spring. And when you need that water, you shall be the first to suffer thirst. And if you do not write them, not opening the channels, of how many goods shall you not deprive others? Now, while writing, I was thinking to myself, it is some time that my sweet Jesus has not spoken to me about his most holy will, but about other truths. I feel more inclined to write about his most holy volition. I feel more pleasure, and as if it were something exclusively mine. And his will is enough for me, for everything. And my always benign Jesus on coming told me, "My daughter, you should not be surprised if you find more pleasure and you feel more inclined to write about my will. In fact, hearing, speaking, writing about my will is the most sublime thing that can exist in heaven and on earth. It is that which glorifies me the most, and takes all goods together, and the whole of sanctity at once. On the other hand, the other truths each enclose their own distinct good. They are drunk sip by sip, climbed step by step, and they adapt themselves to the human way. With my will, instead, it is the soul that adapts herself to the divine way. It is not sips that one drinks, but seas; not stairs that one climbs, but flights that seize heaven in the twinkling of an eye. Oh, my will, my will! In just hearing it from you, it brings me so much joy and sweetness. And as I feel surrounded by my will that the creature contains, as though by another immensity of mine, I feel so much pleasure that it makes me forget the evil of the other creatures. However, you must know that great things have I manifested to you about my will, but you have not yet masticated them well, and digested them, in such a way as to take all the substance, so as to form the whole mass of blood in your soul. Once you have formed all the substance, I shall come back again, and I shall manifest to you other things, more sublime, about my will. And while I wait for you to digest them well, I shall keep you occupied on other truths that belong to me, so that if creatures do not want to avail themselves of the sea, of the sun of my will, in order to come to me, they may make use of the little fountains, of the channels, to come to me and take, for their own good, the things that belong to me." You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 13, Part 3. Fiat.